right, everyone. Welcome to the show. This is the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency's Tennessee WildCast. Good to have you here. Jason Harmon right over here. Get to our guest in a minute. I'm good, Jason. We got a good show today.
Yeah,
we always
looking
have a good show. Yeah, we're going to talk about, the season's right around the corner. Hunting's going to start in no time. I know there's starting to be some excitement out there. Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk about a lot of things wildlife today.
Yeah,
you all right with that?
Free hunting days right around the corner. And
we got dove season coming up. We got squirrel season not too far from open early. I know it's still hot, but it's all going to be around here, and we're going to be talking about that. But what we got coming up, too, that you did a Facebook this week on, you got with Joe Benedict, if you haven't gone out there to look at it this weekend in July, as we get toward the end of July for this show. Check it out. It's a good Facebook about what's going on with our August 5th waterfowl blind drawing.
6th.
August 6th, waterfowl blind drawing across the state. And that's in there, too.
You didn't watch it, did you? You didn't watch it.
I just can't remember. It's been 30, 40 minutes ago. Anyway, August the 6th coming up, and we'll go ahead and give you a little bit of primer on it anyway. It's going to be held at mostly Middle Tennessee and West Tennessee blinds. Mm-hmm. It starts at 7 o'clock. Registration does. If you want to go check out a waterfowl blind somewhere and see if you can get drawn for it or get your buddy to sign on with you.
Right.
If you're not in line by 10, you're out of luck. Make sure you have your correct licenses and permits. If you're a sportsman's license holder, you're in good shape already. The rest of you need to go do a little homework and make sure you got the right licenses and just have a good time. It's going to be a hot day. It always is when we have the waterfowl blind drawing. So make sure you take something to drink with you. And some of these events have big events associated with them, have things happening at them. Right. There's displays set up and vendors there, and they really make a big deal out of it.
They have a good time.
They do. They have a great time. So I wish you the best. Waterfowl season here before you know it. We'll be doing some shows on projections for waterfowl, what it looks like. Is Mother Nature going to work with all of us this year and send down some ducks so that you guys can get out and have a good time, right?
And if I'm not mistaken, the Sandhill Crane drawing comes up a week later.
It does, and that's part of the thing you did with Joe too, right? Mm-hmm. It's out there on the Facebook page. It's just the statewide TWA Facebook page. Get out there and look at it because there's always great information going on. All right, let's widen out. Let's introduce our guest.
Yeah.
All right, Mark Gudlin. Hello, Mark.
Morning.
Mark is the Chief of Wildlife and Forestry here at TWRA, and a lot of you know Mark. He's done a lot of great work for the agency for many years. A lot of you might recognize Mark for his private lands work that you've done. And working a lot with small game, Mark. That's been a good portion of your life, but now you got to work with everything.
Yes.
Yeah. How you like that?
Very humbling and very challenging.
And every time I talk to Mark, he's still working. It don't matter what time of day he is. He's got some kind of project going on with him. So it's probably been a learning curve even for you, I expect, right?
Well, as you mentioned, the habitat portion has been a big portion of my career in small game, and I was assistant chief of the division when there was just one in the division. So, but since then, I've been out of the population realm a little more, so I'm having to get more familiarized with a lot of the details and operations and some of the things that have changed. And again, it's challenging, but it's very interesting.
When I started here, I believe Larry Markle was the chief of wildlife.
Correct. Larry was chief for quite a long time. Forgot out exactly how many years.
Yeah. So we've had this transition through the years, and now it's your turn to do some work. And Mark Wood, just in a nutshell, there, what does being the chief of wildlife, and in this case forestry, that's a change in recent years, but what does that mean?
Basically, I supervise the personnel and operations of a 27-member staff that help guide and implement the game management and forestry programs of the agency. There is a biodiversity division, as you know, Bill Reeves, chief, that handles the non-game portion, but we focus on the game management and forestry. And so in that staff, we have 2 assistant chiefs, and then we have 5 statewide program leaders that coordinate the program implementation with the regions across the state. And then we have 12 forest managers and technicians that are stationed on TWA lands, lands that we own, and the crews do the forestry work on.
That was my next question.
Our agency-owned lands.
What would be an example of forestry work on our lands? What kind of work are they doing?
Timber harvest. A lot of it's dealing with inventory, planning, timber harvests that are, basically for the purpose of improving forest health and the wildlife management benefits that we get from those operations, and a a lot of times we do get some income as an added benefit from that too, from selling the timber. But
Okay.
but the primary goal is managing the habitat for wildlife.
All right. So you said there's a dozen across the state. How many did you say?
A dozen managers and technicians that are stationed various areas. We've got crews on North Cumberland WMA, Catoosa, Cheatham, and then West Tennessee Forestry crew that's primarily works on wetlands areas that they did a lot of reforestation over the last decade or so.
So there's always work going out there
Yeah.
year round. There's
And then-
forestry work going on.
And then we have 4 wildlife habitat biologists that are positions that are actually cost shared with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS for short. And they provide technical assistance to landowners and try to walk them through various cost share opportunities. A lot of what we call the Farm Bill programs are implemented through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and so they, and it's constantly changing, can be confusing, and so they develop management plans free of charge for the landowners to try to get them, whether they land is cropland or pasture or timbered forest lands, try to get them a plan that will get them the wildlife benefits they're looking for and hopefully positively impact their operations too.
It's a non-ending thing, I guess, Mark. That's something that'll probably be around for long after we're gone. Concerned about the wildlife management out there with still continued development in Tennessee. We're going to keep on developing, but the news is pretty good sometimes, right? As far as how many folks are interested in having their land managed just for wildlife.
Oh yeah. There's, we try to, over 90% of Tennessee is private land, and a lot of interest in, most people are interested in wildlife. A lot of landowners want to see wildlife habitats. Many, in an increasing number, own land specifically for wildlife management and recreation. So there's a lot of requests. Really, 4 biologists aren't that many to help meet the demand, but we also cost share 3 positions with Quail Forever Conservation Organization and NRCS, and like the 4 private the wildlife habitat biologists we have, they're actually stationed and housed at NRCS area offices and work in concert with a NRCS wildlife biologist. So as a team together, they're trying to get the boots on the ground to work with the landowners one-on-one so that they understand what they're doing and are doing it right, and again are successful in their habitat management efforts.
All right. And there is web information if you want to go out and find that kind of stuff that will help you out if you're a landowner. tnwildlife.org. You can get it on there. You can find it if you come onto our website, right?
Correct.
Pull down that stuff at the top for hunters and some other stuff out there, and you will find the information that you need that will lead you to Mark's folks. All right, Mark, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on there is not to get as wonkish as we get sometimes, but to talk about the state of our state with wildlife, where we are. And this came with game. I know you said Bill Reeves works with non-game. That's bald eagles and snakes and bats and all that cool stuff. But we want to talk to you specifically about game, what sportsmen are interested in when it comes time to do a little hunting, to do a little trapping, but in this case, mostly hunting. And I want to start with deer. Deer is an animal that's had a lot of work done on it through the years. I think we probably have hit a plateau in the numbers, but that's for you to tell me. Where are we with deer? Where are our numbers this day, and what's the future for white-tailed deer in Tennessee?
Yeah, of course, white-tailed deer are our number one game species. You're looking at about 250,000 hunters. The harvest actually has been fairly consistent, particularly over the last 5 years, right about 165,000 deer that were harvested. We have a very healthy deer herd at this time. Provides a lot of recreational opportunities, and we look to try to enhance those, of course, for deer and all other wildlife where they can withstand sustained harvest. And of course, this year, as you know, we changed the deer hunting units.
Right.
And while in Unit A, there was a decrease from 4 antlerless deer to 2 antlerless, it actually increased a lot of opportunities in many of the, particularly East Tennessee counties. What was Units A and B are now A, B, C, and D. And so what we did is their counties several counties that didn't have any antlerless opportunities that have opportunities now. And we also took a lot of the antlerless opportunities were late in the season, and we moved those all to the beginning of the gun season. So either depending on your unit, either the first 7 days or
Keep that interest
or
there
90s. Yeah.
when people are out there and they want to go. Is that what that's all about?
Greater chance of them having success in harvesting an antlerless deer at that time too.
All right, speaking of antlerless, you also changed this year, a big change in what the antler and antlerless definition is. How's that going?
We'll find out soon. We need to,
Yeah.
as you know, we need to do a lot of publicity about that, because I've talked to several people just asking them if they've heard about it, and still are not aware of the change that we made. Basically, for
Oh, make
I
a
guess
note of
over
that.
30
Yeah.
years, we had a category of deer called antlerless bucks.
Mm-hmm.
So if at least one antler, well, if both antlers were under 3 inches in length, that was considered an antlerless deer and counted towards the antlerless bag limit. Well, now, if there is antler exposed above the hairline at all, then it counts as an antler deer and counts towards the statewide bag limit.
That would be a buck.
That would be a buck.
And so then there's only 2 this year, right?
Typically, there are
Only
there's
2
limit
only 2
is
you
2.
can take,
Yeah,
right.
we're going into our second year of, we used to be, for quite a few years, 3, limit of 3 bucks per hunter in a season. Now it's 2.
Okay. So a lot of hunters are yet aware, because when it first came out, we really pumped it up. But pumping up deer season in May is not like pumping up deer season in September and October.
Yeah,
So we'll do that. But again, if it's above the hairline and you kill it out in the field, it goes toward that buck limit.
So we need to, hunters need to make sure, take that a close look to make sure that that deer doesn't have exposed antlers. Otherwise, if you've already shot 2 bucks, you may find yourself in violation because of harvesting a 3rd buck.
And we don't want that. We don't want to make anybody into doing some kind of criminal act they don't want to do. So please be careful with it, and we will advertise it a lot. We'll get Jason to do a whole lot more WildCast extras or something.
Yeah, we could do a WildCast extra just on that.
We will. We will do that and get some information out on it. Mark, it's going to be interesting, and that was, for those who haven't heard about it yet, it was something that was done in the May meeting. Commission supported it. It passed, I think it passed unanimously or close to it, did it not?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
the commission, that was a request from the commission, and it actually puts most other states, particularly surrounding us, have that same definition, and it clarifies some things, because it's always confusing when you're talking about, you got antler deer and you've got your button bucks, and then you've got antlerless bucks, and so a lot of that gets confusing. But
okay. And
it's
since
just
you're
going
on
to be
it,
a change, like anything is. Time to adjust to that change.
it will. And a button buck, now that you said it, if it's a button buck and it hadn't broke that skin, it's still an antlerless
It's still
deer.
an antlerless deer.
Okay,
Correct.
so I know that's a question that's been asked quite a bit by those who do realize that it's there. All right, good deal. Let's move on then. Let's go to turkey. What about our turkey in Tennessee? We've got a fall season that's coming up. It's going to be different because of some concerns. Again, this was sort of a commission-driven thing too. But how do you think our overall population is in Tennessee with the turkeys, and are there some concerns?
Overall, the population is still good. We're still one of the top turkey states in the country, and looking over the last 10 years, we typically harvest between about 32 to 37,000 turkeys a year, and we've had fairly liberal seasons. We've got a limit of 4 in the spring, one of the lengthier, a fairly lengthy season, about 6 weeks long typically, and we've also had some pretty liberal fall hunting opportunities, and that's where the concern is. And not only Tennessee, but a lot of other states are seeing that, turkey populations were at a high, and then now they seem to be dropping off, and we really don't have, we're kind of guessing as to what is causing it. It may be just a simple function of wildlife population restoration. Often when you're restoring a species like that,
right.
they'll actually overshoot the carrying capacity. You see this period of steep incline, they overshoot the carrying capacity, and then it falls off to a lower level and will fluctuate around that level. So that could be, but there is concerns about maybe that we may have started out a little too liberal in our fall harvest and it was particularly in Middle Tennessee
Oh, well,
where
I
we were
remember you get
seeing the
birds.
deepest
Yeah, 6 birds on
decline since 2010. And in Region 2 harvests about 1/3 of the total harvest of the state. So that's where the biggest concern was.
Okay, so what is the change in the fall? What's going to happen? The spring's still the same, right? 4 birds.
Spring is still the same.
Okay, but the
Correct.
fall season, which is it's a short season coming up, but what is the change?
The change is that any county that was open to fall turkey harvest last year now has a limit of 1. So it's consistent
Okay.
across the state. Some counties, and there were several, I think about a dozen, 15 counties in Middle Tennessee that still had a limit of 6 or 3, and a lot of those, again, they're all dropped to 1 bird. But again, even on the positive, looking at the positive side of that, there's still a lot of opportunity because those are county bag limits. So if I go kill my 1 bird either sex in Sumner County, if I have a place to go in Robertson County or Wilson County, then I can go and harvest a bird
to
there
one bird
too.
there.
So if you have access, and some of the WMAs are open with statewide seasons, so to harvest there, or again on private land where you have permission.
Will the archery hunters only, will they still have an opportunity to bag a turkey?
During the fall archery only season.
Okay,
yes.
but one.
One.
That'd be it. They're
Is-
done too. They got to go to another
Again,
county.
one per county.
Is
One-
that
one per county.
That's 1 bird per day or 1 bird per county
For this one
for the season?
one fall bird per
Period.
county, and that's for
For the whole fall season.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
So it's restricted more, but it's a popular hunt. It's nothing like the spring turkey hunt, but it is a time of year too where you can get either sex, or, as you said a minute ago. You can
Correct.
actually go out and get a
Yeah.
and get a
'Cause
hen.
there was some concern that we may have been over harvesting the hens at that time, but they were comprising about 65% of the fall turkey harvest.
I saw a lot of the comments that came in on it, Mark. I was reading them, and I really think sportsmen, I don't know what's happened since then, but I think sportsmen were behind. They really wanted to see a restriction in the harvest. And has that been your feeling? Am I reading that right, or am I wrong on that?
You've probably seen a lot more comments than I
Yeah.
have, but generally the hunters seem to have agreed with that change.
Okay, good deal. All right, let's move on to another critter. I didn't put it in your notes, so I don't want to catch you off guard, but it just hit me since we were on whitetail deer. What about
Sure.
our elk? Are elk doing okay, the population that we have east of here?
Yes, the elk seem to be doing well. They're very hard to census and come up with an exact, a number on it, just because of especially because of the rough forested terrain there.
Right.
But we're pretty confident we have 400 or more elk, and in fact, we increased
harvest.
the harvest opportunity
Right.
this year. There were 6 permits that we had. There's now 5 archery only permits, and both the archery only permits and the permits that were previously just WMA are now open to both the WMA and 5 counties there, which would be Anderson, Campbell, Claiborne, Morgan, and Scott counties. So
That's
we
good.
are having some.
You remembered all that. That's awesome.
I'm impressed.
That's
We're
why
really
he's the
early in the
chief.
morning.
That's why he's the chief. Yeah. All right. Well, that's good. All right. So elk is good. And Mark, elk's never going to be like whitetail deer, right? We're not ever going to harvest 100,000 elk. And
I wouldn't think so. They've actually been increasing a little bit slower than we originally anticipated when the elk were stocked.
yeah, and limited to an area, and that's the way it's probably going to be for a while.
Right, and
Over
we
on the
do have an
plateau.
elk restoration zone established, and once they get outside that zone, then they're open game at this point.
Okay. All right. Good deal. And I'll remind everyone the hunting guide, is out on the website right now as we speak,
Yes.
tnwildlife.org. You can go look at it electronically. It'll be out in hard copy pretty soon. It has a lot of what Mark's talking about in it. The seasons anyway, maybe not the management, but at least give you an idea of what the seasons are, how many what you can do with your bag limits, and when your season dates are. All right, what about our black bear, Mark? They're not here in Middle Tennessee where we're doing this show from today, except for occasionally one kind of wander through. Is that telling us anything?
Bears.
Bears.
Yeah, bears will, the juvenile males particularly will roam. We've had bear come up here. It's probably been 10 years or so. I believe that was from Louisiana. Made a big excursion.
I remember that.
around
Yeah.
the southeast, and we do get reports occasionally of these bears wandering. And when you look over the past, really the black bear population is doing well. In fact, overall, maybe on an increase. This last year, we had our third highest harvest at 550 bears, and
Wow, that's
we
a lot of
tend to
bears.
have our highest harvest in the years when there's poor mast, soft mast berries and hard mast acorns. When it's poor mast in the mountains, then they are traveling around looking for food more and are exposed more to hunting pressure at that time. But then, of course, we also restored bear population up in Big South Fork area on North Cumberland Plateau, and we have our Zone 4 is located there.
There are 5 zones this year in bear. Is
Yes,
that
there are
correct?
5 zones.
Five
There's-
zones, and they all have, some are with dogs and some are not. And if you're not a bear hunter, you really need to go look at that if you want to know. But that's how it goes, right?
Correct. Yeah. Then there's 4 zones 1 through 4, and then there's a transitional zone. And more than likely, I would expect we will still see some increase in the bear population, and particularly in the more forested counties over in the Cumberland Plateau, and we may, in the coming years, see an expansion of Zone 4 in the transitional zone. I'm just,
what does
I'm
that
just
mean?
guessing at this point.
What does transitional zone mean? I mean, I can understand 1, 2, 3, 4, but what are we saying when we say transitional?
Well, it's looking at the bear habitat primarily being like Cherokee National Forest and Great Smoky Mountains, kind of the transition out of that heavily forested landscape more into more of an open urbanized area.
What does that mean, though? Is if there is hunting in the transitional zone?
Yes,
there
there
is
is hunting in the
some amount of
transitional
hunting,
zone.
and that's all in there too. It's our bear hunters. Bear hunters are, some of it's just such a tradition dating back so long and stays within families a lot. But are there new bear hunters coming in all the time in Tennessee? Do you think? Do you think that bear hunting is something that attracts hunters like maybe not to the degree, but like deer attracts hunters or turkey attracts hunters?
I would believe so. I guess I'm not having delved into that sort of detail, but knowing that the bear harvest, we're seeing that gradual increase.
Right.
I would think they're recruiting new bear hunters into that tradition.
Okay,
I
all
would
right.
say that Smoky Mountain area would draw some hunters, I would think.
Over there on that Appalachian, and we still have areas where bears are protected, correct? Like a refuge
Reserves,
or
yeah.
reserves in this case, they're called, still out there.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Let's move to another area that you're comfortable with everything, Mark. But we're going to go into a small game that you've got a lot of time in, and we got the dove season coming up here, really just a few weeks away. I know it's hard to believe, but it's not very far away at all. We got the dove, and we'll have some waterfowl too. But what about doves specifically in Tennessee? Is there a way of knowing? Are they like ducks where the Wildlife Service can go out and fly over the potholes and get projections on what the harvest is, or do we just, or what the numbers are, or we
Yeah,
just
don't-
kind of do the same thing?
Yeah, they're a lot harder to count. With waterfowl, you're counting them on ponds when they're concentrated. But nationwide, dove populations seem to be very stable. In fact, I can't remember how many. It's in recent years, the season was lengthened from 70 days to 90 days. So it was 60 days prior to that sometimes. So we've seen an increase in dove hunting opportunities. And, of course, as an agency, we try to provide as many opportunities as we can. Last year we had around 85 public fields.
Right.
About 2/3 of those were wildlife management areas, and I think we had 28 leased fields last year where we compensate the landowner for providing that public hunting opportunities for doves.
Okay, and we got an extra coming up on that for Facebook pretty soon.
Yeah, we'll have that out. I guess in a couple of weeks we'll put that out.
Okay, and we got Joe Benedict in here, and he's going to talk about those fields. But they'll be available to everybody, public and private, and we'll be looking for private fields any day, I guess, pretty soon, right?
Yeah, they'll be looking pretty soon. By August 15th, we should have the wildlife management area fields posted on the website, and from there up until 2 to 3 days prior to the season, we'll still be in the process. Our field personnel will be in the process of trying to find good fields where the landowner's willing to lease those hunting rights, and we can provide public dove hunting opportunity.
And here's my curveball. Why September 1st at noon? Do you remember? I don't remember. I've been here a long time, and I don't remember why September 1st, beginning at noon. That's when the season starts.
I'm only working at that time.
You're going to be probably going to be working a dove field. So anyway, you remember?
It's been a long time since I was involved in that discussion. There was always, should we open it on the first Saturday in August, or people wanting to open it a lot earlier, but yet Fish and Wildlife Service is stuck with September 1st.
For whatever, it's a
noon is
tradition.
opening.
And is that
Joe
is that,
Joe probably remember it.
Joe might remember that. Is that part of it too? The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service gives you guidelines just like they deal on ducks. They deal with doves too, and we're maybe taking the very first day we can.
Yes.
Okay.
For all the migratory game birds, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service provides us a framework as far as the number of days and between this opening date and this closing date, and so the state wildlife agencies then have the leeway to choose how they want to split that up within the framework that we're given.
And then I noticed Joe, I was eavesdropping when Jason was doing his interview the other day that we'll show later, but as he was talking about all that with the doves, he was mentioning that we had, I think, 8 days that were moved or shifted into one of the segments. Is there a reason for that, or is that something? It's not the first segment; it's the second or the third.
I think it's the third segment that was shifted.
Do you remember why that was done?
There's a lot of hunter input to try to get more days in that third segment, and that seems to be either the more popular ones tend to be either early in the season or late in the season. Although probably about 90% of the dove hunting that occurs in Tennessee typically happens in about the first 10 days. After that second weekend, the hunters are on to squirrel hunting or archery deer hunting and lots of other ventures. And as opposed to other states like South Carolina, they have a lot of dove hunting clubs and they have a lot more consistent hunting through the season. But we're pretty much early, and then there's a segment of the hunters that will follow the doves through the season.
Some of them like that third season when those doves come migrating.
You get a lot more of those, what they call the big northern doves
those
coming
big
through
birds.
there late in the season.
And I can hit those big birds. They're slower too. Anyway.
I've seen you shoot, Doug. I don't know if you can hit them or not.
Well, if they're on a tree limb, maybe. But, don't shoot them off guide wires.
1 foot up.
All right, Mark. We're going to run out of time on you a minute. I don't want to do that. We got one or two other things. What about our rabbit and our quail? Where are our rabbit and quail in 2016?
Not what they used to be, and that basically is due to habitat. There's a lot more, we expanding population, lose habitat outright to developments, and the land that we have is being utilized a lot more intensively. We're already a state of small farms. We're about 4th or 5th in the nation as far as the size of our farms. Average farm size is about 135 acres, and as they get sold into smaller farms, even where they're not being intensively cropped or pastured, people like to see it mowed. And then there's vines in the woods, and we got to get those out. Those sorts of things, intensive land use like that, just isn't conducive to good quail habitat in particular. Rabbits have a little wider range of habitat succession that they're able to utilize, more in urban areas around houses.
They also have a lot of babies.
Have a lot of babies,
They do.
But quail need, those idle grassy fields, and they need to be managed fairly periodically. Otherwise, Tennessee, just about every place grows up to trees if you don't provide some management practices on it.
I always will say, I understand it because I've talked to you for so many years. It always seems odd that we can bring back this 20-pound bird so well and this little 6-ounce bird we have such a hard time with. But I guess it's pretty delicate to be a small bird, to have their habitat concerns, and then everything, they're ground nesters, right? So everything in the world can eat those eggs.
Yeah,
or every
and they have a
mower in the
small
world
home
can run
range
them.
is one of the big things. They can't, like bigger animals, can travel to find all their habitat needs, whereas covey quail typically is going to be on about 20 to 40 acres.
That's not much room.
They don't find what they need there, they're not going to be there.
Okay, they're going to be gone. So, but it's a big effort at TWRA to work on quail. Some folks don't think the agency, I think, is working on quail every day from 8 to 4:30 and way past that. The guys are out there trying to make quail habitat better.
And we could talk more specifically maybe in another
We
segment.
will,
about our
Mark.
efforts.
We plan on getting you back. He's our wildlife chief. We got to get you back in here, okay?
Sure.
But you've given us some great information, getting folks fired up for the season, and I wish you the best in your job because it is hard. We haven't been fishing in 5 years, I don't guess.
Or quail hunting.
Or quail hunting. Or grouse hunting. The only grouse I ever got was with this guy right here. I saw him get a limit of grouse.
Yeah, you missed that bird just so I could get my limit.
That's what I like to think. Anyway, Jason, tell them what we do need to know.
Well, you can find us on tnwildlife.org. Just go there and you can watch, listen to future shows, previous shows are all right there, and stay connected with us. We're trying to let you know what's going on.
Hey, watch those WildCast extras. They're really good. All right. Thank you, Mark. All right. We'll see y'all next week.